From the dawn of humanity, man in his arrogance has pondered the great mysteries of life. Why, for instance, might one have only a pair of sticks, one in hand and one tied to his leg, while others would lie peacefully nearby in sleeping bags? He would first seek to exploit lesser creatures, taunting and provoking them with his mystic pyramid. This would be the beginning of the conceit that would one day lead man to claim that he had walked on the moon. But as we shall see during the course of this film, such claims are not to be so readily believed. Mankind, in his imperious insolence, began his deceitful quest for the moon in 1912. He would build a massive vessel boasting of its ability to ferry 2,200 persons in luxurious comfort to the lunar surface. He christened this behemoth Titanic. But the irony of God would be the sinking of Titanic in water. A scant 25 years later, the Germans claimed that they would be able to conquer space, and in 1937 set out for the moon in their latest craft, the Hindenburg. Immediately upon launch, they were blown drastically off course, and opted instead for a secondary destination, Lakehurst, New Jersey. But it would be God's own irony that upon reaching New Jersey, that the mighty Hindenburg would crash into the Eiffel Tower, causing it to burst into flames. They would temper the tragedy by claiming that this photograph was of the wreckage of the Hindenburg, not in New Jersey, but on the surface of the moon. It can be no coincidence that when we look at the ponderous size of the RMS Titanic, that it is nearly exactly the same length as the Hindenburg. And in a case of godly irony, we can see that the moon rocket Saturn V is exactly... never mind. A true scientific mind has only to look at a few of the outrageous claims of NASA to see that the myth of space travel is just that, a myth. In this never-before-seen photograph, taken at night time, we can clearly see that the mighty Saturn V rocket is not even aimed towards its intended target. If it were to be launched in this configuration, it is clear to see that it would never reach the moon. In order to reach the moon, the rocket would be required to follow a curved trajectory, such as is illustrated here. But it becomes plain to see that if it were to follow such a course, it could not do so without crashing into the top of its launching tower. This is the evidence that NASA has long sought to suppress in order to perpetuate their notion that man has visited the moon. In 1957, the Russians startled the world with the launch of the first man-made satellite, Sputnik, a word meaning literally, fellow traveler of Earth. But it would later be learned that a Russian scientist had merely sneezed at the moment he was asked what the orbiter would be called. The escalation of lies between Russia and the United States had begun in earnest. In desperate arrogance, NASA would launch rocket after rocket in order to convince the world that they were moon-bound, while ignoring the condition of the rest of the world around them. But did they really launch the craft that they said they did? We have determined through rigorous speculation, theorizing, and guessing that NASA's top rocket scientists were in fact Hollywood's top special effects technicians. They knew that in order to win the race against the Soviets, that they would need to produce convincing-looking models of both spacecraft and the moon itself. Early attempts proved unsatisfactory until it was pointed out that the models would look much more convincing without lines of longitude and latitude. The stand, it was decided, would also have to go. In this never-before-seen photograph, we can see a lunar model being cleaned by what can only be described as a Q-tip. While the model's detailing increased, evidently so did the carelessness of the artists creating them. NASA released this photograph of what they said was the interior of the Apollo spacecraft. We've looked at it and have come to the inescapable conclusion that it is actually the control panel for the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland in California. But no matter how convincing still images may appear, the world at large would never be convinced unless they saw space in motion. The clumsy early efforts can be seen in this recently discovered footage. Evidently, no one told the special effects team that spaceships need to move forward. The United States finally got their break to claim that they had reached the moon first, when spies discovered that the Soviet lunar model building team proved to be woefully inadequate. The time had come to fake a moon landing. To lend an air of authenticity, pilots were hired to portray astronauts. In this never-before-seen footage, we can see them reviewing their script, learning their lines, rehearsing their moves. But it would soon be learned that the pilots were not going to be as convincing as hoped. Watch as we see in this exclusive, rare footage that the astronaut is very poorly lit, the camera is wandering, and his words are very hard to understand.
This is the crew of Apollo 13, wishing everybody there a nice evening.
NASA, realizing that their credibility was at stake, hurriedly replaced the mere pilots with what appeared to be competent actors in order to have footage suitable for broadcast. Watch now this never-before-seen replacement footage of the same scene being played on a supposed journey to the moon.
This is the crew of the Apollo 13, wishing everyone back on Earth a pleasant evening.
The deception would continue all the way up to the White House. Here we see former US President Nixon, who believes that he is speaking to the astronauts in outer space. But as this never-before-seen footage shows, the actor astronauts are being loaded into a special room where they will actually be speaking to the president merely through a pane of glass. An ordinary dune buggy, filmed at a scientifically calculated rate on an ordinary beach at night with really, really bright lights, yields this nearly convincing scene. This famous, rarely seen photograph of the first supposed footprint on the lunar surface reveals a startling conundrum. There is only one footprint, and it is commonly known that astronauts have 2 feet. In an effort to cover up this anomaly, NASA attempted to justify it by requesting that all future astronauts only hop. But as this never-before-seen footage shows, they were unable to keep on only 1 foot. In this exclusive photograph, we can see an astronaut enjoying a cup of coffee between excursions. Since there is no air on the moon, there could be no reason for an astronaut to have what appears to be a go-cup filled with coffee. Perhaps the most controversial issue is that of the waving flag on the lunar surface. As this obscure footage clearly shows, the flag does indeed wave on the lunar surface. We believe this to be a rare instance of authentic film. But what is most disturbing is that the flag is being waved by robots, as is evidenced by their jerky movements. The dramatic effect of the capsule splashing down in the ocean is convincing, until it is revealed in this never-before-seen photograph that it was merely a model tossed from a helicopter. It is a near-perfect illusion. On the bottom of the craft, we can clearly see the letter O, which of course is the first vowel in the word model. We have proven through hunches, assumption, hypotheses, and supposition that such claims are not to be believed. Also, the fact that I am speaking authoritatively and with a British accent means that our proof is scientifically irrefutable. And this much we know for certain. Until such time as Sasquatch is liberated from obscurity, man shall never walk on the moon. We must not be deceived.